Hello, Laurence and Nicholas. Can I just check you're there?
Yes, we are here. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We just had a few technical gremlins this morning, so I just thought it would be worth checking. We're live now. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Rory Squires. I'm from the news team at theticketingbusiness.com. I'm delighted to be joined today by Laurence Miller and Nicholas Robinson, respectively the commercial director and head of ticketing at Nimax Theatres, a major operator in London's West End. So just before we start the presentation, do send in some questions via the Q&A tab on the right-hand side. I'll jump back on after the presentation, and hopefully there will be some time to answer a few questions. But first of all, Laurence and Nicholas, if you're ready, it's over to you.
Good morning. Up to about 10 seconds ago, we were being moved to tomorrow morning 9:30. So it's very good to be here. To introduce first who Nimax are, Nick, if you just put the next, I feel like Chris Whitty, put the next slide up, please. So Nimax, we are the owners and operators of 6 theatres in the West End. We were established in 2005, originally with our first 4 theatres, which were the Apollo, the Lyric, the Duchess, and the Garrick. We then added the Vaudeville to the group, and then finally the Palace joined the group about 7 years ago. And we produce shows in our theatres, and we rent our theatres out to other producers. Our shows at the point of lockdown was everybody talking about Jamie at the Apollo, The Play That Goes Wrong at the Duchess, Magic Goes Wrong at the Vaudeville, City of Angels at the Garrick, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child at the Palace, and 6 the musical at the Lyric. That was, sorry, not 6 musical, Thriller Live was at the Lyric. We now have 6 coming into the Lyric. That's where we were at the point of lockdown. And then the moment of lockdown arrived. And that was, for us, a very tough moment, because there we were, our business was closed. We had to stop operating, stop showing shows, and everything came to standstill. Thankfully, we were lucky from a business point of view that we were able to furlough our staff. So that came as a massive protection to us. We have over 300 staff that work for Nimax at the point of lockdown. And then we moved into the phase of what's going to happen next. And I'm forever the optimist. I believed that come June, July, theatres would be open again. I then moved to the point of September, believing theatres were going to be opened again, and we kept pushing for when theatres were going to be open again. But we were stuck in this battle of knowing when are we going to be allowed to reopen theatres again. So I'd like to, before we move on to our story of how we started to reopen theatres, I want to just hand to Nick, who's going to talk about what we did with the millions of pounds of tickets that we had booked in at the point of lockdown.
I think it was clear probably after about 2 weeks that the virus wasn't going anywhere in a hurry, and despite our optimism about opening late spring, early summer, it was still imperative to the longevity of Nimax, actually, that we retained our advances. So it seemed, imperative to us that we had to offer some incentives to our customers to stay with us, so we could keep those advances. So we started to offer upgrades to the next price level up on seats, which really resulted in about a 75% retainment of our advances on many of our shows. I had a dedicated team of 6 people, that I think we've all embraced new technology over the course of the last 7 months, particularly with things like Zoom. For us, the unsung hero was Google Forms, a series of Google Forms that helps us collate all our refunds and exchanges, and a small team of people that were able to access those from home in order to process people's money. The added complication for us, which most theatre groups probably wouldn't have experienced, is that only 4 months before lockdown came, we'd actually changed both our ticketing system and our payment provider, which left us with about 2,500 bookings, which we had to manually refund people by bank transfer. what else did we do? I think that's about it.
Yes. And so that was our first phase of this, that we had to return tickets and exchange tickets. And we ran on a rolling basis of, as month by month went by, we were moving tickets, either exchanging them or returning money to people. And then as a company, we made our business objective, and our decision was that we wanted to reopen our theatres as soon as possible. We made a decision as a business that we were not going to make our staff redundant, but we wanted to retain our staff because we have a lot of very good staff that have been with us for a long while. And we wanted to find the way to get the business reopen. And within our senior management, we looked at the cost of making our workforce redundant, mothballing the company, and deciding when social distancing is removed, we will reopen the business and rehire people. We looked at that, and then we looked at that versus the other side of it, which was saying, if we have social distancing and we're allowed to open theatres at reduced capacity, how can we operate? What would our losses be? What would our costs be? And we worked out that we would be slightly better off by operating rather than keeping the company mothballed. So we made the decision that as soon as we were able to, we would reopen the business, and we would look at the right sort of programming to reopen, because for obvious reasons, a show like Harry Potter and the Cursed Child would not be able to reopen immediately because it needs a much larger capacity of audience, because its costs are much higher. So we then worked on changing our objectives for our programming. So some of our shows that we knew could not return, we then worked on finding alternative programming that would work for this period. So we looked at stand-up comedy, we looked at small musical shows, we looked at entertainment and concerts. So the whole programming we have geared around to working within a socially distanced environment. So we are due to reopen with Six the Musical at the Lyric Theatre. The Palace Theatre has Adam Kay and Jimmy Carr and various stand-up comedians and several concerts. The Play That Goes Wrong will return to the Duchess because it is a small play. And we are looking at other comedy and entertainment programming to reopen the theatres on that kind of basis. So that was what we did with programming, and we got that in place, ready to move as soon as we knew that we could open theatres with social distancing that would work for us. And our next stage was to then work out how we could operate the buildings within the format of the social distancing the government has in place. So we knew that we had 1 metre social distancing with mitigation, which is wearing masks. So we remeasured our theatres, we looked at the distances between seats, we have relayed out the stalls, so everything is 1 metre apart and certain rows have been removed. So if you go into the Palace Theatre now, it goes A, B, C, D, F, and row E doesn't exist at the moment. And when social distancing changes, row E will come back into the theatre. And then we have worked with our ticketing partner to find Enliven, to find a way that we can sell the tickets on the left to right social distancing basis. And fantastically, they have built us an algorithm. And what that algorithm does is it deals with our left to right social distancing. So to explain it in the most basic form, a customer goes onto our website, buys seats numbers C, 3 and 4. It then misses out seat 5, and then we'll sell to the next customer seat 6 and 7. So that way we are not selling in bubbles, but we are selling in reaction to the customer demand, and it enables us to maximize our load within the theatres, working within the social distancing rules. And then our ops department have also worked on how all the other parts of the theatre operation will work. One-way systems, hand sanitising, temperature checks on the doors. We have extra cleaning happens and a whole new regime backstage. And when we are opening most of our shows, touch wood, in the next month or so, we will also have a testing regime backstage for our actors and stage manager, where we are using lateral flow rapid tests that will enable us to know within 15 minutes whether someone has COVID, which means that we are able to break down the lines of social distancing on stage. So every theatre now has a 100-page operations manual for how we operate that building in the COVID world. And then on top of that, a lot of work has been done with how we have changed our ticketing systems, working with Enliven, to make that work in the COVID world. And I think Nick will talk through some of that now.
Yeah, I think, well, it just required a new approach to the traditional ticketing for live events that we're used to. You know, but we also had to keep the process familiar, you know, had to use concepts that customers have used in other contexts. And so, I mean, we had a few objectives. You know, firstly, we had a duty of care to the customers and to the staff. And so we needed to have a facility to confirm with attendees that they don't have COVID systems and that they're not required to isolate, and many of the other points that we need to check in on. So we came up with this idea, not our idea, a long-standing idea of using a check-in, and Enliven TixTrack built out a sort of fantastic functionality for us using their API that enables us to get a response from a customer, and that in turn feeds back into the system, which enables the ticket delivery. From there as well, because we had to also think about not just ourselves, but all the ticket agents that we worked with. So that functionality is all there in the API, and we get the customer's details, and we are dealing with the check-in and the delivery of tickets, whilst the ticket agents are still fulfilling that vital role of giving us extra sales channels out there and reaching audiences that we don't necessarily always reach ourselves. Contactless ticketing as well. I think, you know, the West End has been sort of quite traditional in its approach to ticketing live events. We're still using paper tickets. We're still collecting from the box office years on from so many advances in many other areas. And we knew that we needed to catch up. And so part of that check-in process is also the contactless tickets as well, and the introduction of ticket scanners in our venues. Laurence has already talked about the social distancing. Again, that's something that TixTrack spend a lot of time on. It's adaptable, and it doesn't. It's not just unique to social distancing. In a COVID world, it can be applied to so many situations where you might require that extra space in your theatres.
And I think the amazing thing of what we've gone through over the last 3 months, I think, from when we moved from returns phase to returning money to preparing to reopen, in reality, we've rebuilt all of our ticketing systems that we've created working with Enliven TixTrack. We've created a system that can sell tickets within the social distance world and can react to that. But also we've changed that whole process of how we communicate with the customer. So they book a ticket. At that point, when they book a ticket, they receive their confirmation. They do not receive their ticket. And Nick is showing here our check-in process. So they then receive their email 48 hours before. They confirm that they're healthy and all their party is healthy. The point they confirm that, their ticket is then delivered to them. And then that is then what they come to the theatre with. So we have embraced that whole model of what happens on the airline with the boarding ticket, with the boarding card, as the way in which we now operate the buildings. And the amazing thing is that for three and a half weeks ago, we were able to reopen our theatres, and we reopened our first theatre, being the Apollo Theatre with Adam Kay. All of these systems in place, and it all worked. And on top of that, to manage our social distancing flow, we had timed entry for customers. And the beauty of it was they were turning up at the time it said on the ticket, and they were going through the door that it said on the ticket. So we were able to manage them through the building. So we proved during those 2 weeks that we ran Adam Kay at the Apollo, which was before the next lockdown, that we were able to make the West End reopen in this world. The customer felt safe, the customer felt secure, and we were following all of the rules that had been set to us by government and the authorities. And then when we had the heartbreak on the 5th of November, when Boris Johnson stood up and said, we are now putting the UK into another lockdown, and we then theatres were shut again until December the 3rd, we have moved into the phase again. And where over the course of that weekend, I shunted 23 productions, and we took them and we moved them to completely new dates. And touch wood, please God, all of those sorts of things. We will now reopen our 6 theatres. Instead of reopening them from the end of October, as was the original plan, we will now reopen them from the 4th of December with programming in all of those theatres, and hopefully start to welcome audiences back in with social distancing in very safe environments that follow all of the government's rules, working with Public Health England and with our new ticketing system that makes it all work. And customers are desperate to come back. The sales that we've seen since we announced our socially distanced program is that customers are desperate to come to the theatre. They want escape, they want entertainment, they want laughter, they want joy, they want the feeling of a communal experience of people sitting in the room, laughing together, singing together, being entertained together. They want that, and they're desperate that. And we're sitting here with our 6 buildings with shows ready to go and ready to welcome them as soon as government allows us to open the doors, which, please God, it's December the 3rd. And our first show, Death Drop at the Garrick, will open on December the 4th. 6th musical will open on December the 5th. The Understudy will open on December the 7th at the Palace. December the 9th, Play That Goes Wrong, will open at the Duchess Theatre. And on December the 12th, we will open our first full-scale book musical, returning Everybody's Talking About Jamie, will open at the Apollo Theatre with over 40 people backstage and everybody in all our theatres tested for COVID every single day. That's the plan, that's the dream, and we're ready to do it right now as soon as we're allowed. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Laurence. I think everyone in the industry would echo your hope for the coming weeks and months. Really interesting to hear how you've managed this incredibly turbulent year. Thank you also to people for sending in your questions. Quite a few have come through. And we'll start. A couple of people have asked about streams, basically. Did Nimax consider streams? Was it plausible? Was it possible from a cost logistical perspective? And also just looking to the future, when it fully reopens, if you like, would a hybrid model work of perhaps reopening and live streaming, particularly in those early months, I guess, when there might still be a reluctance from many customers to actually go anywhere public like a theatre?
So yeah, we did look at live streaming. I think our focus has been very much about the live event and getting people back into the building, the live event, because also all the other income streams it relates to. We did a streaming last week of a play that was in our theatre a few years ago called Amelia, and we had a good number of downloads of it, but not. For me, not enough to make it work commercially, and that's my problem with the streaming issue, is whether you can really make the money commercially for it. And also, I think there's so much content has been given away over this period. How much people are really willing to pay for the content? But also, I think I have an issue personally when I sit at home watching my telly on my wall, and I watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or BBC, seeing proper programs on there, and then seeing the stream theatre experience. It's never as good as being in the live room, and I want to keep the focus on the live room.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I embrace streaming that other people have done because it's helped people come in, keep in contact with theatre.
Absolutely, nothing replicates the live experience. Someone else has messaged in, and I think it's an important question. When you reopened, I think there were reports you could get about 20,000 customers roughly into your theatres per week. Obviously, that's a much smaller number than usual, and obviously you saw a great appetite from those customers, if you like, those core customers. You mentioned earlier that there's a real appetite for the theatres to reopen. How can you be so sure, though, that the much smaller number of core customers who have come back at short notice like they did, how can you be sure that can be extrapolated really into your normal broader audience and the same appetite from the same number of people will return?
So I believe that the market is there for the socially distanced programming at the moment. I think there is a journey that the industry, in whichever theatre we're talking about or music venue, etc., has got to go on before we can all get moving back to full capacity again. And I think that is the world of everything else around us, be it vaccines, be it rapid testing. All of those sorts of things are what need to come together to bring back the full level of business. And also from a bigger West End picture, we need tourists to return to the West End, because that for a lot of West End shows, the long running shows, they rely on the tourist. So until we see the tourists coming back in their large numbers, we're not going to get there for the full West End to be back to the level of where it was back at the end of this time last year.
Yeah, no,
programming was so key as well. We're seeing, we're able to sell something like 56% is probably the maximum we can get into any one theatre, and we are seeing those figures. Yeah, no, absolutely. And just on that point, actually, and the point you made about the programme, Daniel Pratt has sent in a good question, I think. Are you targeting the same audience as before COVID at the moment? And have you seen a noticeable difference in the number of people who are really willing to come to the theatres in this sort of interim period? And which changes in the public profile do you expect in the coming months, basically, as you gradually return?
I think we are seeing at the moment a slightly different market, but that relates to the shows that we're doing. So the decisions we made about programming was focus on things that are aimed at the younger audience, and I mean that sort of the sub 40-year-old audience, rather than putting Noel Coward plays on or Eugene O'Neill plays that reflect a much older 60-plus audience. We're not going to see them wanting to come into town and take that risk. But the younger audience is what we're seeing. And from a marketing point of view, where my spend has been directed on my shows is I'm spending that money on social media. And that is where we are seeing extraordinary returns, like far, far beyond any return on investment I've seen before.
Yeah. No, that's excellent, and very best of luck for a big few weeks and months for you. Of course, we have to wrap it up there. Unfortunately, time's been against us, but really appreciate your time in joining us this morning. It was great that we could get you online. For attendees, you can connect with Laurence and Nicholas in the system. Please do. But we're going to hand back now. Thank you once again to Laurence and Nicholas. We'll hand back now to Mark ahead of the next session. Many thanks both.
Thank you.